Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Yashodh Singh.
Hi everybody, how you doing? It looks like we've got a bit of a graveyard shift. It's almost done, but hang in there. I'm going to be not very long. It's a 30-minute presentation. We may wrap up a bit sooner. And yeah, we'll go have some drinks. All right, guys, so I'm going to change the pace a little bit from probably what you've been seeing a lot of in this conference so far. So we're not going to talk about supply chains as such. We're going to talk a little bit more about procurement. That said, we're going to talk a little bit about some digital transformations. I'm going to try and give you some of the tips and tricks that I did at Naspers to kind of really bring digital procurement to life and basically create a procurement team from scratch. So we're going to talk a little bit about the tips and tricks. Some of this stuff is applicable to a broader supply chain, but a lot of it's going to help you just get your digital procurement or your procurement in shape very, very quickly. So a little bit about me. I started at Naspers officially in January this year, so I've actually hardly been there. It's not even 6 months. I was consulting at Naspers a little bit before that, so I helped them really think about how it is that they do indirect procurement. And that's kind of where it led to one thing led to another, and next thing you know, I'm kind of helping them transform on a full-time basis. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about what it is that I've done, a little bit of context, a little bit about digital, and then we'll talk a little, the main part of this presentation is going to be some five kind of tools that I've used. Very, very practical stuff that you can start thinking about if you haven't already. One thing you can do for me is that you can get your cell phones out, because we're going to need them at some point in this. So this is not one of those lectures where I say put everything away and pay attention. You can actually get your cell phone out, and if you connect to the internet, definitely bring that. Okay, so why digital procurement? So I've got a quote here from Google's chief economist. Basically what he says is that the ability to take data, to be able to understand it, process it, extract value, visualize it, communicate it, et cetera, that's going to be one of the key skills that everybody needs going forward and organizations going forward. Now you've heard that a million times already throughout the course of this conference, but it's going to be a theme that we're going to basically talk about. Because what we're going to do with digital procurement is we're going to basically say we want to manage data. That's basically all we're doing. We want to do it quickly, we want to do it efficiently. Yeah. Okay. So procurement has evolved. So what I thought is that I think procurement in an indirect and also in a direct kind of space really started coming to the front in about the 1980s. So when these consulting firms started going and meeting big companies and started saying things like you should organize your spend in categories, you should do things like sourcing, strategic sourcing. They gave everybody 6-step methodologies and 7-step, and it really started becoming a thing in about the 1980s. What then happened, so companies started putting in things like strategic sourcing. Do we all have strategic sourcing kind of departments and focuses on indirect spend in this crowd? A little bit? Okay. Then what actually happened, according to me at least, is that we got hit with this global recession across the globe. That's where procurement really became like a little bit of a superstar, because we started having a role to play in a declining global economy. We started basically saying, well, as procurement, we can help a business control costs. We can do very clever things, like we can help control demand. Do you really need that? We can get the right price, the right quality, and we just took what we learned in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and we really started building a seat at the table, if you got it right. So what's kind of happened just now then is that we got hit with this digital disruption. It's been going on a bit longer than that, but I think from maybe about 2010 is when it really started kicking off. And I think the important thing to talk about here, or the key takeaway from this slide, is that digital started disrupting us in 2010. It's still disrupting us. But what does that mean? Because everybody's talking about blockchain and artificial intelligence and robotic process automation. What does it actually mean? And what does it mean for procurement in particular? And what I want to say by that is that the theory hasn't really changed across anything that we do. Maybe it has a little bit, but the best practices are still the best practices. What digital is going to help us do, and what I'm going to show you, is how it's going to help us just do the things we always wanted to do, the things we always knew that we had to do, but we actually never got to because we were so busy managing administration and managing paper that we actually never got to doing the things that the theory always told us, or usually told us. I remember when I was a consultant, I was at a client, and I was basically, they were talking about procurement, and I was showing them this Kroljik matrix. Have you guys seen it? So in that Kroljik matrix, basically it says you should categorize your spend, and there's leverage categories, and these guys you should basically go and do some strategic partnerships with, take this stuff out on an auction, and blah, blah, blah. And we were having that conversation with the client, and I remember them telling me, they brought out a textbook from like 1980 and said, no, Peter Kroljik came up with this in the 80s. Don't you have anything new? So it's something that I always think about because actually it's still right, if you ask me. But how many of us actually go and segment our suppliers and do what the strategy tells us to do? And how much of us, like not even focusing on it, don't have the capability and just burdened by governance? And what I was trying to say to that client in particular is that don't throw away what you always knew was good. Just use digital to actually say, I can actually do that now. I'll spend less time on paper, I'll spend less time on admin, less time on governance. That's exactly what happened at Naspers. So Naspers never really had a procurement team. So if anybody in this room has ever seen a procurement manager job or a buyer job at Naspers, anyone? I haven't. So we literally, you got this company, it's one of the biggest companies in the world, one of the biggest South African companies, they never had a procurement team. I mean, we sit back and we think about that, it's kind of ridiculous, right? But basically what they found out because of what's happening in the media is that our governance and the way we do procurement has been kind of put under the spotlight, right? So I'm not going to go down that road, but you all know about what's happening there. So NASPER says, guys, we need to do something, we need to get better at our governance. We need to start building a procurement capability. What we also said happening is that Netflix is coming into South Africa. So they launched in South Africa, they tripled Showmax's subscribers, right? That just kind of tells you what the consumer sentiment is. So we know competition is coming. Cell C just launched Cell C Black. Do you know that Amazon just signed a deal to show 20 football games free for Amazon Prime subscribers? So you pay like $10 a month to get Amazon Prime, and over the next year you can watch 20 Premier League games for free. So we know that things are changing. We know we need to do things better. We know our governance has been crap, just to put it out there. We've made stupid mistakes. So what we're doing is we're saying, well, let's really transform. Let's evolve, right? Before this, we were sitting at Procurement Comes of Age. We were just having conversations about things like strategic sourcing, right? In fact, we weren't even in the 80s. And what we've done in 6 months is we've basically gone straight up to Procurement Evolves. We're talking about digital. We're talking about automating governance, basically just being a really cool, high-performing procurement team, basically overnight. So I'm going to kind of give you guys some of those tips about how we did that. But very, very quickly, if you've got your phone, please will you go to that web page. Just a couple of things to point out. There's an H at the end of my name, Singh, with an H. People make that mistake. And it's not 2010, it's 210. So let me know when you're there. So I'm going to go into the next slide while you do that, but the link is still up in the corner, polev.com/Yash Singh 2010. So what will happen is you'll get your little screen. It'll tell you that you're waiting for me to start. It might ask you to log in. If it asks you to log in, just click on skip, and it'll take you to a little bit of a poll. Yeah. While we do that, let's define digital. Does anybody know what digital means? Is it a bit nebulous? Anybody want to go for a definition? You can just shout it out. We're not here to judge. It's kind of broad, right? Is it? It's a very broad kind of thing. So when you say, let's go digital, like I always go and say, but what do you mean when you say, let's go digital? But why? What's wrong with paper? Paper's great for audit trails. I send it off to Metrofile. 6 years later, when they ask me for it, I log a request. Somebody goes and looks in the warehouse, brings it back. That's not actually what happens. You lose it forever, but I'm just saying. I mean, we're not getting rid of paper just for the sake of getting rid of paper. So the definition that I would like to give you for digital, because it's kind of my definition that I kind of think about whenever I'm doing something, I kind of just look at digital as being very something, you know, we've got the city at the bottom here, and what's happening for the city is that it's generating millions of data points. So we're back to that quote that I started with. How do we analyze data? How do we interpret data? So what happens is that you've got a user that's sitting there and he's working on his laptop. Are you guys all at the web page, by the way? Kind of. So you've got this data points, millions and millions of data points that are basically happening. What then happens is that we access this data, or we create this data using different devices. Then what happens is that that data sometimes gets sent to the cloud, and what I've got here is a phone sitting in the cloud. See what I did there? And then basically it can kind of communicate back to other devices, and the loop kind of continues. And the important thing to note on this is that there's always a device in there, and a device is talking to another device, and importantly, there's a human on the other end of that device. But what the devices are doing is something that humans can't really do. And that is going back to the quote that we started with, analyze data, interpret data, collect structured data, millions and millions of lines, do something usable with it, and give it back to you. So my very simple definition of digital is devices that talk to each other. That's what I think. So basically, when we say about let's go digital, and you can take it and you can apply it across supply chain, customer, whatever you want. I'm talking about in procurement context. I'm saying when we talk about digital procurement, we're not throwing out the Kroljik matrix, we're not throwing out sourcing and category management. We're just saying, how do we get the devices to talk to each other so that we don't have to? The reason we want to do that is because the devices are much better at managing paper, much better at doing analytics than us as humans are. So we automate that, let the devices do it, and we do all the cool stuff we always knew we should be doing and always wanted to do, but never could because we're sitting there analyzing paper like this much paper. Go to the poll site. Oh, you guys have already started. Everybody, let me know when you're done. So there's a lot of other going on there. A lot of people are buying directly in SAP. A couple guys on Oracle, interesting. Nobody on Coupa. I like Coupa. The point that I'm illustrating here is two things. One is I'm looking for a little bit of I'm thinking about changing the procurement system at NASPers. And what I've just done is I've got a lot of community intelligence from all of you about what you prefer. So this slide is going back into my business case deck, by the way. However, you guys are very much focused on supply chain. So I'm assuming what a lot of you guys think is that SAP, SRM, Ariba, and some of the other systems are very good at handling things like stock. I'm not so much interested in stock. We've got a couple of decoders here and there, but mostly I want to manage my indirect spend. So I'm going to talk about catalogs. So I'm currently looking at Coupa and Ariba, but this is nice. This is going to go into my business case, like I said. Oh, everybody loves SAP now. So you guys are buying directly in SAP, managing directly in the modules in SAP. Interesting. The actual reason why I put this up here is because I just wanted to illustrate what it is when we talk about digital, right? Because we're not doing anything different. I love the fact that I can ask you questions, but previously, before a digital world, what I would have done is I would have said what I was doing earlier. People would have been shouting at each other, I would ask a question, and I would have no way of interpreting that data other than who makes the loudest noise. And maybe that view of mine is kind of distorted because I'm sitting maybe closer here, and I'm hearing a lot of the noise here, and I just have no way of making sense of it. So what we've done is we've taken a technique that we've always done, we've always used, polls, right? Nobody argues that a poll or a survey is a great way to kind of, get data. What I've done is I've taken myself out of that poll, and we put you in front of devices, and we said, let the devices talk to each other. So you go back to my previous slide. We've done something we've always done. But what we've done is we've gathered so much data. There's no mistakes here, unless you made a mistake, but the machine didn't make a mistake. There's no analytical mistake. It's done in seconds. I think you guys touch it, and it's done in seconds, right? So previously, and this is exactly what I've done in my procurement space, by the way. So previously, the box is still there. When I started at MultiChoice, I basically said to the guys, when I leave here, I was a consultant at that point, my going away present is I want to go and have a braai or a bonfire, and we're going to chop up the tender box, and we're going to roast some marshmallows. And that's what I wanted as my going away present. And everybody said to me, that's never going to happen. Like 3 weeks later, I'm going to show you what I did. 3 weeks later, people are like saying, we don't want to ever see paper again. True story, because we've basically done this. What we said is that a machine is much better at getting responses from us, analyzing it. So while another team is sitting there getting tenders, trying to understand if it's a closed bid, waiting for that stuff to close, then getting it, analyzing it, what's in this Excel file, this guy did this kind of free text, how do I compare that to the other one? We don't do that. We go straight to saying, well, what's the insight here? And the insight here is basically saying a lot of people are not using SAP or Coupa or Oracle, the systems that I'm doing. And a lot of people are not even using Ariba and Coupa, which I find kind of interesting. So what I've done is we've said, let's automate the governance, right? I don't download these responses. I don't store them in my shared drive. I don't get the BE certificates and file them away. I don't send them off to Metrofile. I just leave all the responses in the cloud. If anybody wants it, go and find it. It's right there. So I spend 0 time on governance, 0 time on paper, and all the time on strategic insight. All right, you can do that as well. Is that what everybody's doing here? Who's got a paper-based tender process? Yeah. So one of the cool things that happened the other day, not so cool, is we were all sitting around. This was about a month ago. We were sitting around at our table, and this envelope comes in. And we all looked at each other, and we were like, what is this? It was like an envelope addressed to us. So we opened it up, and there was like a tax certificate and a BE certificate. And we all just had a good laugh because we hadn't seen a paper document in months. And all of a sudden, one supplier emails us, not emails us, physically dropped something off, and we didn't even know what it was. We literally just sat there going, what is this? But just 4 months before that, everything came in on paper, which I thought was quite cool. I'm going to tell you how I did this, though. It's very easy if you're thinking about doing this. Cool, let's talk about the tools. The first thing I want to talk about is Don't try to do it all yourself. On-demand outsourcing. So the thing that I thought when I set up procurement at MultiChoice and Naspers was that why should I do this myself? Right now, I'm not talking about when I say outsourcing, going and getting somebody to manage your accounts payable team or whatever the case may be. I'm saying, how do you leverage the community, right? And a way that you can do that instantly is to do some on-demand outsourcing. So kind of think about the tasks that are in your daily life where you think, I could build this capability from scratch, or I could just buy it from somebody else. So to be clear, it's not an FTE thing. It's not about, no, I can only have 10 resources, so I need to get the additional help through consultants or whatever the case is. It's about saying, what work do I actually want to do myself, and what do I want to go out and buy from the market? So I'm not going to advertise for anybody here, but if you want, you can give me a shout. I'm going to give you a few websites where I basically went and created my category workbooks on things like management consulting, security services, all of this basically in 2 weeks, because we just kind of went and bought market information. You guys do that with training, right? Who actually creates their own training materials in ours? Like nobody really, right? A couple of guys do it. But one of the benefits why you go to a provider is because you say, I'll focus on this. They are collecting best practices from what everybody's doing, and they'll share it back to you. I'll give you an example of leveraging community intelligence. What do you guys think of my slides? What's that? I didn't outsource them. What I did is I leveraged, going too fast. I didn't outsource them. What I did is I leveraged community intelligence. Right, so to give you a quick example of this, every single one of these beautiful pictures that I found on an app for free, right? So I just built these slides myself using high-res pictures. And again, using that theme to say, before this, what you would have done in a non-digital world is you would have thought, how do I get these kind of photos? Maybe I must go and take them themselves. But you know there's photographers out there that are actually willing to share their work with you for free. So what this app does is it basically says, if you're a photographer, you can put your photographs onto the app, and anybody can come in and use it, and the licensing is sorted out. You don't have to pay royalties. You can do whatever you want with it. But there's still people, even without the app, that would do that. You would just never find them. So what we've done is we've said, well, let's take this concept of digital. There's an app. There's devices that are talking to each other, and now I can access stuff that I never did before. So instead of me having to create all of this stuff and go and buy expensive stock photos, I can use digital, and I can leverage that community intelligence to basically do some slides. I did these on Sunday, by the way. So on-demand outsourcing. The one thing that I'm going to do, if you guys want to give me a shout afterwards, I'll give you a website. You can go on there, and what they've got is that they've run hundreds and hundreds of projects on things like security services, management consulting, just every kind of indirect spend, and a lot of direct spend as well, actually, if you're into chemicals and manufacturing, that kind of thing. So I'll give you an example of how we use that, right? We did our first ever management consulting kind of project, strategic sourcing project, and normally you'd spend 6 months putting together a strategy on management consulting or writing a category playbook. And what we did is we went on, we bought some intelligence. It was actually free, and then you pay for a little bit of the premium stuff. And we've got all these benchmarks. How many consultants should be on a project team? What kind of consulting are you doing? If it's strategy, you've got a different mix of partners to consultants. In a consulting world, that's what drives costs, the amount of partners on a project, the amount of resources. So instead of you sitting there and trying to figure this out by doing RFIs in the market and seeing which consulting firms got the best pyramid, just go and get the info. So what we have to do that, though, is get out of this mindset where we think we're the best and we don't want to talk to other people. What we should do is we should start saying, well, we can talk to each other, and we can leverage that community and that community intelligence. And the best way to do that is outsourcing. Outsource where you're going to get intelligence that you would not normally have access to. Outsource where you can leverage the community intelligence. All right, if you go and Google it right now, this is a practical tip, you'll find these websites available. You go and you log in, you can download category books for free. You don't have to sit there creating things. Okay, and the next one, the war on paper. So 100% e-sourcing adoption. So what we did is we actually don't have a nice fancy e-sourcing system. And when I got there, what I did is we just bought a very basic kind of cloud-based software. And when we go and look at this company, and again, I'm not going to advertise for them, but feel free to give me a shout afterwards. I'll tell you. What we did is it's like 4 guys that sit in the UK, and they kind of almost develop out of a garage. But the security and everything is legitimate. So we bought this stuff. We gave it to all of our category managers. And we were just hearing about implementation disasters. This took us 2 weeks to implement, right? E-sourcing. We went from paper to no paper, to that kind of, where you guys fill in responses online, 2 weeks. We're literally 2 weeks. And that's why I say, in a matter, I've been there since January, and now when we get paper on our desk, we have a good laugh, we don't know what to do with it. So I will tell you about that, but basically what you should be thinking about doing is getting rid of paper from your lives, and more importantly than paper, what you should be doing is getting rid of unstructured data. So when you're trying to manage paper, you now start like getting involved in governance issues and where do you store this stuff, physical stuff. Even when I say get rid of paper, I'm also saying emails. So if you guys are getting quotes and doing tenders on emails and asking guys to give you, information and RFPs, and you're getting it through your email, you're still getting a lot of unstructured data. You're still not automating your analytics to the extent that we just had a look at when you all filled in that survey. Get a nice e-sourcing system. I'll just tell you how much it cost me. So it cost me 150,000 Rand for every single one of my category managers for a year with 2 weeks of implementation to go digital. That's the world we live in at the moment. So if you guys are getting emails on invoices, you're doing tenders on paper and things like that, even 100,000 Rand, and you can go completely digital. You can send me a message. I'll tell you the software I'm using. So basically 100% e-sourcing adoption is what you should be going for, or we did at NASPERS. So one of the cool things that we're also doing is that we're now creating the kind of live and analytical dashboards. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But basically what you want to do is that when you're using systems like SRM and whatnot, and even SAP, there's no kind of pre-built dashboards that you get. So one of the important things that we did at MultiChoice is we basically said, how do we give ourselves information so that we can actually just kind of put performance into focus? Because when I walked into NASPERS, I had no clue about what was going on. So you ask for reports and the data's dirty and you have got no cooking clue about what to tackle. So one of the things you should always do is basically make sure that you've got to automate your analytics as well, so that you can always have access to the right information to be able to make the right decisions. One thing that I actually wanted to mention when I spoke about this was that you can basically do this kind of for free, right? You can go and download a Power BI dashboard. Have you guys seen Power BI? Seen Tableau? So instead of doing all these Excel reports and pulling out random files, you can actually do an automated file in Power BI. It's going to cost you $10 a month. You just need to go ahead and do it. Start by asking yourselves, what are you trying to solve? So instead of just getting a whole lot of different reports and thinking about like how, it's really cool to have some visuals and some analytics, what we do is we ask ourselves questions. So I kind of say, what am I not happy about and what am I struggling with? So the first question I had for myself is like, I can't even see what's happening in terms of the spend, right? So I look at it from that way. I ask myself some questions. What am I struggling with? Spend, right? Who my main suppliers are. So you ask yourself questions. You think about what's your problems. You ask yourself questions. And then you think about how can you create a dashboard that will, or some visuals and some analytics that will actually help you address that. So go and download Power BI or Tableau. Power BI is great because, like I said, it's $10 a month. And what you can do is if you can host your data on a SharePoint site with Power BI, what basically happens is you can automate it. So you can write a little macro, a consultant can do it for you, it's almost nothing. They'll clean the data, edit it, enrich it, and pop it into a dashboard. And Excel is gone. You don't need Excel in your life. You don't need Excel reports. So what I did is I created a Power BI dashboard, and I shared it with my boss. They look at it on their mobiles, and I never update that file. I did my reporting once. It took me a little bit longer than just doing an Excel report, because you obviously had to write a few macros and things like that. But I did my report once, and never again. So you should be thinking about that. But make sure you get the right reporting, right? You don't want data visualization just for the sake of it. Number 4, automate the back office. So one of the things that we did is we bought some really cool software called OCR, Optical Character Recognition. It was one of the things we did. It cost me $1.5 million. And what it basically did is it means that previously what happened is that every single invoice at MultiChoice, 100,000 a year, basically what we did is capture every single one of those into SAP manually. Now what we did, I told you the price, it was relatively cheap. We've got software in place. It comes in, an invoice gets sent to a mailbox. A little robot like this guy looks at your invoice, does all your kind of information scanning for you, and copies it into SAP so that you don't have to. So you've got a little robot there. It's like dirt cheap, like I said. If you think about the efficiencies that you're going to get. If you're thinking about when we define digital as letting devices talk to each other. So somebody emails an invoice to a centralized mailbox and let the device talk to SAP. The device will update SAP with all the fields and capture everything. So what do you do instead? You start thinking about all the things you wanted to do, right? So my AP staff, what they do now, what they previously did was they were just clerks that sat there capturing things into SAP all day. What they do now is they evaluate stuff for early payment discounts. They settle queries. They're a lot more involved, and they're a lot more involved with helping us optimize our working capital, and they're a lot more involved with helping us chasing up on outstanding issues so we can turn invoices around faster. So I'm not saying go and put a robot in place and get rid of everybody. What I'm saying is put a robot in place and then start doing the activities that you actually want to start doing. The strategic activities that you always knew you should be doing, you just never had time to do it. So that's one of my cool tips. And here's a little one where we're kind of going out a little bit. And I say there, my tool number 5, don't forget to innovate. So what I'm basically building at the moment is we're trying to have a look at how we make some contracts smart. So quick question, I'm going to ask this one. How many of us have got somebody who sits in every first Wednesday of the month? They go and they look on a website, find a fuel price, and go and update an Excel file. And then they tell all the logistics providers what the price for that month is, because there was a 5% increase. Apply the formula. Right? We're all doing that, come on. Right? So what we're busy building is we're trying to make our contracts smart, because you know where the data comes from, right? It comes from the website, Department of Energy, for example, or xe.com, or whatever, SafeSA table that you're looking for. You know what the formula is, so why do we need to go back and kind of update things every month? We know it's going to happen anyway. So what we're building at the moment is we're prototyping a smart contract. So a smart contract, if you don't know, and this is not so much because there's a massive business case behind it, it's just because it's fun and I want to do it. That's literally why I'm doing it. I mean, you can have a little person sitting there and updating fuel prices or computer prices or whatever once a month. We're just going to do this because it's fun. Like I said, it's a self-executing contract. So what that means is that the contract will execute itself. So it'll change its price. It'll enforce its own terms. So the 3 things that we do to make that very real, and it's very simple stuff, is you can start with a blockchain. So a contract is always great to have on a blockchain, but actually you don't need the blockchain. The only reason the blockchain is going to help you is if you want to make sure that your data is immutable. But let's just say we're doing something like a simple fuel price adjustment. You can actually do it off the blockchain. If you go into the blockchain and you build a little contract, I've actually got interns at the University of California doing this for free for me, by the way. Sorry, did I say California? I meant Los Angeles. So basically, they've got a little blockchain community, and I told them about my project, and they're building it for free, just because they want to be involved. But basically, what's happening is that they're going to put this on. It's a blockchain called Ethereum, and in Ethereum, you can actually write code into the kind of blockchain. And because you can write code into it, the code is obviously able to execute some basic kind of functionality. Then what you do is you can basically say, but where's all this data coming from? So we've got data coming from xe.com. It's maybe coming from the Shell website, the fuel price. Maybe there's data coming from SAP on my volumes. And it doesn't really matter, because what you do is you just say to the blockchain or the code, go and look there to get the data. So you find the little point on the Department of Energy website where they publish the stats every month, and you just tell the computer to go and look there. And it'll go and look there. And go and look on xe.com to give me the exchange rate, and go and look at this manual formula that I got out of my RFP, blah, blah, blah. You get it. Instead of you doing that every month, a little computer can go and do it for you, as long as the data is not changing where it's coming from. And then what you can do is you can do a bit of basic process automation. If what is RPA? It's basically a very complicated if-then, if formula in Excel. If this happens, do that. So if the fuel price goes above 5%, change the base price by 4% or 3% or whatever the case is in your formula, and then that contract executes itself. So the reason why I wanted to tell you about this one is because it's not really kind of one of the practical kind of tips and tools that I was telling you about, but it's always fun to innovate, and it's always fun to ask university students to do things for you. They're very willing, especially when it comes to this kind of thing. So those are my 5 kind of things that I wanted to tell you about. 1, think about digital. Make sure that it's devices talking to each other. And when you start looking at it in that context, it becomes very easy to kind of think about how is this going to help you. Then we basically said, let's look at things like 100% e-sourcing adoption. Key to that is making sure that you've got structured data so that you don't spend time with paper, you don't spend time with governance, you don't spend time filing stuff. Let it live in the cloud. Prove the concept with some simple software, and you can go bigger later. Spoke about outsourcing, and we only outsource, in my opinion, otherwise we'll build a capability when there's community intelligence that we want to leverage. So when there's information that all of us are working on, and we want to tap into that intelligence, that's when you should consider outsourcing. And then we said we can also have a bit of fun and do things like smart contracts. So I wanted to just end off and say, so next steps at MultiChoice. So what we did is that we kind of started at Procurement Comes of Age. This is where we basically started. We said, I got into MultiChoice and there was no procurement team, like I said earlier, right? So they haven't even started talking about things like strategic sourcing and how do we manage categories. And what we've done in just 6 months is we've got 100% e-sourcing adoption. We've got a huge pipeline of savings that we're doing. We actually did our first auction, reverse online auction the other day. And this was all in 6 months. So we built the category strategy. We've got category managers. Basically, what we did is we took our little cable car and we used digital to go straight to evolving. And that's the story of what we're busy with at Naspers. Yeah, hope you like it. I've got 34 seconds left for a quick question.
Are there any questions?
Yeah. So this is a brilliant question because when I first started, and this is just the one question we'll do. When I first started, I used to roadshow my butt off, right? I went to every single person in the business and I did roadshows, and every single person told me, it's not how it works here, you can't do it like this, we're an agile company, we're entrepreneurs, we do things kind of quickly. And that's what I heard from every single person, and that was the biggest challenge. So what we did, like I said, really quickly is we did everything online. Right? We started putting the categories in and we started getting savings on everything we do because it's never been addressed before. And now I still do roadshows and they still tell me that it's, it's things that we need to be agile and whatever. But every roadshow I do, there's people in that room, 50% of the people put their hands up and say, no, hang on. I worked with Yash and his team and it's much better. It's so much better. So that's been the biggest challenge. And also the tip to that is to say, get stuff like this e-sourcing, put in things like the robotic workflows in your AP. It's quick stuff, it's easy stuff, it's cheap. Prove the concept, and you can do that kind of stuff. You'll also help start getting the buy-in from the business. You just need to be able to do it much better than the business can. Time's up. We can have a chat offline. So there's different things that you can do, right? So in the public sector, there's no law that says that you can't collect information online. In fact, it's better, right? Because I'll tell you a silly story, right? I don't know if you guys remember. I'm walking off the stage. There was a tender box that blew up in Limpopo 6 months ago. So obviously somebody didn't like what was happening and they stuck a bomb into the tender box and it blew up in the middle of the night. So something like the e-sourcing that I told you about, all your governance and rules are built into it, so you don't need to worry about it. So at MultiChoice, we do close bids, right? So none of us can see it, but we can see who's received the invitation, we can follow up on that kind of stuff, but basically the governance is built into it. So that's the kind of stuff you need to think about. How do you support the governance? It's not about just doing whatever you feel like, it's about taking the technology and saying, and like I said, you do the best practices, we're not changing that. We just talk about how do devices help us do what we always knew we wanted to do. Close bids, store the data on the cloud. I mean, the government can love that stuff, right? Nobody blows up a tender box. Exactly.
Yash, thanks very much for your presentation. We enjoyed it very much. And just as a token of appreciation, a small gift.
Cool, thank you very much.